Right, welcome back to Inclusive Design 24 2023, brought to you in partnership with our Platinum supporters, Google and Intopia, and our Gold supporters, Barrier Break and Tetralogical. You can follow us on Mastodon, and if you have any questions for the presenter, post them there using the ID24 hashtag. Alternatively, you can go directly to the YouTube page for this talk and put your questions in the chat, and we'll collate them all for the Q&A at the end of the session. On that point, a reminder that ID24 is a respectful community, and you can find our code of conduct on the Inclusive Design 24 website, so behave. I am delighted to be once again this year joined by my guest host, Jared Smith. Jared, over to you.
Hello, thank you, Patrick. And I am thrilled to be here and excited to introduce our next speaker, Livia Gabos. Livia will be presenting how to do a usability test with deaf people in the Brazilian context. And we'll throw it over to you, Livia.
Thank you. Thank you for the present. So let's start. So I will present myself. I'm Livia Gabos. I live in Brazil. I'm Afro-Hispanic because I'm Afro-descendant, and I live in Latin America. I have a bachelor and master degree in computer science, almost 15 years working with accessibility. I work as both tester and programmer in different language, but more recently, I work as a UX designer and UX leader. But everything I told you is in the past. But right now, I'm chapter leader of Lady That UX in São José dos Campos, São Paulo. And sometimes I'm hostess in podcast Lady That UX in Portuguese. I'm working right now in HandTalk as an accessibility product owner. So this is important content because everything I will say to you, it's happening in HandTalk. So I will talk about some contents about Brazil, some history, and I will talk about HandTalk, my company I work. I will back in 2021 because everything happened in this year. I will talk about the contents of the usability test, a pilot test, and a new test we have to do, some results and conclusions in the final. So let's start it. So contents about Brazil, we have a population of 216 million people. 18.6 million or 8.4% have some disability. I will talk about some of these disabilities. 1 out every 4 elderly people have some form of disability. 3.4% have a visual disability. 3.8% have a physical disability, and 1.1% have a hearing disability. These numbers are recently, this data, it's from 2019. So search the government did. So about the hearing disability and deaf people. 2.3 million or 1.1% of people have a lot of difficulty hearing, or they can't hear at all. So they say these people have a hearing disability or a deaf people. 2.9% of people who are 18 or older don't have a basic education. Of the people have some difficult or deaf, and 0.5% of people with university degree have some type of hearing disability. So about everyone in university, 0.5 have some hearing disability. And I will talk about the past. I say about the right now what happened in Brazil. So in the past, we have a situation is important about the history of Brazil. So in the year 1880, the Milan Congress, what is Milan Congress? Is the second international congress on education of the deaf, declared the oral education, oralism, was superior to manual education, sign language, and passed a resolution banning the use of sign language in schools. It's the Congress happened, they say you have to learn oralism, you have to do oral education. And who people say that? 164 representatives say about you have to learn oralism. Of these 164 representative, on which only one is deaf. So only one deaf people say not, and 163 people say you have to learn oral, you have to do, you have to get oral education. So this has happened in the past. So Brazilian follow these rules, and 2002, 122 years later, Libras was officially recognized as a legal means of communication. Libras is the Brazilian Sign Language. So in 2005, it's become a regular curricular subject in schools. So just more than 100 years later, people start to learn Libras as officially means of communication. In 2010, 88 years later, the profession of Libras interpreter was regulated. So years later, we need to we have the curricular subject in schools. We have a professional interpreter to help these kids to communication in school. So a little late. In 2015, the Brazilian law of inclusion of people with disability regulates the bilingual education with Libras and Portuguese. What Libras means Língua Brasileira de Sinais, a Brazilian Sign Language in English. So this is the past. I say a lot of numbers for you, so I will resume about the Brazilian contents. So 1.1% of the population has a hearing disability or is deaf. Libras was recognized only in 2002. After that, before that, no one have a official language. Before that, the majority of deaf people have two choices. Try to become oral individuals by learning to read lips or forced vocalization, or be apart from society with no access to education and almost no rights. And out of 1.1% of people with hearing disability or who are deaf, 61.3% are fluent in Libras. So no everyone's fluent, because is legal as a meaning communication so late. So because that no everyone's is fluent in Libras, deaf people is not fluent in Libras. Most part, when the people is fluent in Libras, Libras is the primary language, while Portuguese serves as their secondary language. It's similar to me. Portuguese is my primary language, and I know English as a second language, but I will commit some mistakes. I understand, I can communicate, talk in English right now, but I will commit some mistakes. I will confuse some words. I don't have the all vocabulary, so this is happening with deaf people too. And most deaf people have difficulty to access bilanguage education also. This is happening in Brazil. So I say a lot of, but if you have to resume about everything I say, if you have to remember something, I say this is a slide you have to remember. So deaf people may or may not in Brazil know Portuguese, use Libra as a primary language. So this both. Most education institutions don't have the resources to hire interpreter Libras. Principal, the majority is public schools. Most extra courses, such as for learning UX designers, don't have a Libras interpreter. However, right now, designing events are becoming more accessible day by day, but it's happening in Brazil right now. So what happened? I say a lot of deaf people. So one I have to say, it's hearing people like me know nothing about Libras. Everything I told you, I learned in the past few years when I start to work with deaf people. So most people in Brazil don't know nothing. So now you and some people in Brazil know something about the deaf people and the Brazilian context of deaf people. So, okay, I say a lot of the Brazilian context, so let's talk about the usability tests. But I have to give you a contents about HandyTalk. HandyTalk is the company I work right now, and everything I say happen. The company has less than 100 employees. In the product team, we have less than 25 people. In artificial intelligence team, we have 15 people. Within this team have a linguistic team inside, and we have two main products, HandyTalk app and HandyTalk plugin. These two products are assistive technology that use avatars to translate text to sign language. So we translate Portuguese text to Libras into Libras, and English test to ASL. And right now, the HandyTalk plugin is available in version 8. But everything I say to you don't happen right now, happening 2021. So back in this year, what happened in HandyTalk? This product team have few than 15 people. UX design team started that year with 3 people. I was a UX leader alongside the other 2 team members. One of each is deaf and communicates using Libras. In artificial intelligence, he also have less than 15 people, and HandyTalk plugin this time was in version 4, but was changing to version 5. So this is an important information, because was the project we will work in this time. The main goal was improve the UX experience of people who use the HandyTalk plugin in their cell phones, because the primary interface was created for developers to desktop computer. So the interface to cell phones was not great. So the main problem in this time was we lack information about the user because they don't have a UX team, they don't have a design team to do some research, to find information about the user. So I'm UX leader in the time. I have to start the project. It's the main project we have in this time. So what I think to resolve this project should continue the idea. So I think we have to create a functional prototype for the usability tests with users. With this functional prototype, in this time, the people use, we create the whole interface, new interface, and we, in this time, we do the usability test. So right now you can think, oh, poor woman, she was thinking straight, because why you do something, you think you can do this usability test with no information, with nothing. So why I think that? My team and I are creating everything from scratch. So we have some hypotheses, but we need more information. The main product feature must work during the tests, and this things is very important. And maybe, most probably, we will be recruiting deaf people who aren't the current users. So because that, we have to create something the people will understand what is working, for what's this, we use that. So this is important. So the context of test was, this is my first usability test with deaf participating. It was the first usability tests of the deaf team member and the linguistic team too. So me and the other team member had a previous knowledge about the usability test. So for us, it's okay, but we have to teach to others about usability tests. And our communication had to be conducted in Libras, to planning, to create the script, to everything we have to conduct in Libras, because the deaf team member. So how everything happened? We started the planning like other tests. We thought we would have a double the work for this particular test, because was my first and the other team member with deaf participant. So we have to learn some things. And we did some classes to interpreters about the what they can't and can do in usability tests. If you don't know, in Libras, I think in most sign language, but I say just in Libras because my context. In Libras, is common for an interpreter to contextualize what the other person is saying, because sometimes they have to explain some words, some technical words, some context. But you know, if you don't know, in usability tests, you can do that. So we have to explain this for the interpreters. So we think we have to do a pilot test. It's usability tests common doing a pilot test to know if the participants understand the tasks. And this pilot was made with 2 deaf people who work in HandyTalk, but in other areas. So they are not related to product team. So they know about the product, but they didn't know about the new interface. So it's okay to we need to know if they understand what the tasks we say to them. So, okay. So we do the pilot test, and what happened? The pilot test goes wrong. So because that we do a pilot test to be sure everything's gonna be all right, but in this case, everything's going wrong. So what happened? The communication wasn't working in this time. The main problem was because the script was adapted from Portuguese to Libras. So in Libras, the structure of the sentence are much more simple, and the grammar in Portuguese is much more complex. If you ask to some outside the stranger, stay in Brazil, try to learn Portuguese, everyone will say Portuguese is hard to learn because it's a complex sentence, the grammar, is difficult. So Libras is more simple. The structure is more simple. So because that we input some complex in Libras because they translate the adapter. So we start at the beginning, we revised the usability test, and we created a new script with the base of we learn from the pilot test, of course. All people related to this test helped to create the new script. So me and the hearing UX designer say what we need to say to the other people. The interpreters and the deaf UX designer try to create a better sentence directly in Libras. So after we create everything directly in Libras, we all revised the sentence to be sure aren't any tips in the questions. And after that, we create a translate from Libras to Portuguese. So this made it easier for the interpreters as not to confuse the signs, and more is easier to remember what the sign they have to do, because the sentence more simple and was translated directly from Libras. So, okay, we do everything new, revise it, more simple this time. So the big day was come, we started the usability test again. So the new test, the deaf UX designer was observer during the test. Me and the other UX designer took turns in moderating the test. We always had two interpreters during the test, so they could take turns, more easier to them to because they can be tired to translate, so they could take turns. And the test happening, some problems happening too, always happening. So you explained some problems we happen during the test. So the biggest problem we have was the participant had to use two screens during the test. So deaf people need to see the interpreter all the time to be secure, to have sure they understand. If someone asks for attention, they have to see all the time the interpreter. For this, the test, they need to share a screen, use a HandTalk plugin, and continue communicate with us. So if he asks something, if we ask to, they explain something and see what happened in the screen. So everything happening all the time. So this is difficult to use one screen. So therefore they use cell phone to complete all the texts as impossible, because in the cell phone they have to change the screen all the time. So they need to have two screens. So some people didn't have two cell phones available during the time of test. When this happened, we asked to them to use a cell phone in the test and a computer at the same time, so they can use the cell phone, use the HandTalk plugin, the cell phone, and continue to see us in the big screen. Other people only had one cell phone and no computer. Sometimes we rescheduled for the test for when they had a computer available in the work or with some friends or something like that. But sometimes we just cancel the test because they don't have a computer. And we have another problem too. Sometimes even when a computer was available, the participant was not able to split the screen. So if they, sometimes we use the, just the desktop, not the cell phone, because we have to test the interface in desktop, new interface in desktop too. So we ask to them split the screen, but sometimes they don't know how to do that. So because the participant had a different level of tech acknowledgement, it was uncertain how much they could use a cell phone or a computer well. So this is something we have to learn when the usability test started. So it was difficult in beginning. We spent more than 1.5 hours or almost 2 hours sometimes to help the people share screen, split the screens, and everything happened in the same time. So was hard, but we learned a long time. We do the tests to be more quickly. I will say about another Brazilian contest for you, because this is important. 62% of the population have access to internet use exclusively through their cell phones. 80% of the houses in Brazil have access to internet. 82% in urban areas, 68% in rural areas, and 16% of population share the internet with the neighbors. So they don't have internet, so they ask to share for neighbors to share with them. This is a important contest because everything I say to you happened in pandemic year, the second year of the pandemic. So not everyone have cell phones. Majority of people, poorer people, or low income, don't have a cell phone this time. The Brazilian government have to give cell phones and give internet principle for kids, for students to continue see the classes in schools because everything happening online. So they have to give a cell phone because not everyone had a cell phone, and they have to give internet to have sure that the students continue the schools. So it was a difficult time for Brazilians, and I say to you this because you have to understand not everyone, the people have access or use the HandTalk plugin. Probably they can participate to a usability test because they don't have a lot of resources. So this is another difficult time for us because right now we don't do we just do a digital test online remote tests, but we continue to do that, but it's difficult because we can to have access to all the deaf people. So this is another context. It's important I say everything to you. So everything happened, we management, everything. So we finished the test. So, everything happened, but okay, we finished. Was difficult, difficulties, but everything worked in the final. We discovered we have to change all the first idea of the interface, the development, the people, the dev people, be a little mad because they work hard to create the functional prototype and they have to change everything. So, okay, happened. Because the usability test was important, and we have some difficulties with buttons and some interactions this time. We continue doing improvements, the interface, everything with the most part of the things we discovered in the time, we already changed, but we have continued discovering the improvement of the interface. This is happening all the time. So I will say some learnings and conclusions right now about everything I said, about everything happened in usability tests. So we do many other tests with other products ever since. So we learn how we have to conduct tests with deaf people. This is more important of everything. And one thing I didn't say to you, the legal terms we continue to use and improve in other tests, because this was the first usability test we made. So for have sure the people will understand about the terms, the legal terms they have to sign, and we be sure about the understanding. We recorded all the legal terms, so we send them to them with the legal terms to sign, and so they can see before the test, and you understand. We ask if they have some questions, but everyone understand with the video. So this is what we do, continues do right now. So, okay, this is a lesson we learned. And all the interpreters right now, they know how to do a usability test. This is an important thing because we continue to do usability tests. Most important, all the people in design team right now knows Libras. So some developers knows too, but they learn more slowly than the design team, just because we have right now we have two deaf people. So all the people in design team have to communicate with everyone all the time. So I do some push, I say to them, all the people starting design team in HandyTalk, they have to learn to be independent of linguistic team, the interpreters, because it's important to be more around. How can I say that in English? I don't know. Be careful with each other and have sure they understand they self. So everything, because that. So developers learn something, but it's not so good. And the most important thing I have to say to you, we understand with the correct communication is the most important thing in design. This is the most important learn I have to say to you, and the learning how to be a better communication is essential. No matter what the language we use, the understand the communication, be careful how we communicate with the people is more important than everything. So this is the learn we learn, and I hope it is used too. So I finished my talk. This is my social media, if you can talk to me, but in my LinkedIn, Twitter, and my website, I just say, I write and say something in Portuguese. So if you understand Portuguese, you can talk to me. If you start to talk to me in English, I try to communicate with you, but okay, with my difficult, but everything's gonna be all right. I hope you understand everything I say, so that's it.
Well, thank you very much, Livia. That was a great talk. Jared, have we got any questions?
Yeah, thank you again, Livia. That was wonderful. Yeah, I think it's important for everyone in this field to really consider the international context in different languages. It really is an aspect of accessibility that is often overlooked. It was interesting to hear about your testing experiences, the difficulties and the successes, right? Very often we don't share the difficulties and struggles we have in testing. And I appreciated your guidance about being careful with presuming things about our users in our tests. One question that came in from Andre on YouTube. The question is, Livia, do you think that no hearing UX is still at the beginning and is still expensive to develop?
No hearing UX still in beginning. Oh, yes. Thank you, Andre, for the question. I know, I know him. So, yeah, for most people, they in Brazil, I think in most countries, the people don't have access to deaf people, don't know it's a people is deaf. So I think it is important because in WCGA, I think it's pronounced that this in W3C, these Libras or the sign language are not obligate. It's not the primarily things you have to do. It's just when you have video, you have something. It's not the primarily thing you think when you have some text. So this is a difficult we have in Brazil because not everyone, deaf people, knows Portuguese. So most people in Brazil think, oh, if I just put all the video contents the people are saying in Portuguese, write in Portuguese, translates, transcribe in Portuguese, every deaf people will understand, but not. This is not the primary language. So because that is is a myth, and because that the most UX designers don't have this kind of knowledge. So they have to know this context. It's a different context, and most people don't talk about. Most people in this area in Brazil knows about the blind people context because screen readers. They can use, they understand what everything happened. So is a easier context to learn, to understand. So deaf content is a little difficult to most people. So I think it's beginning in Brazil, principle, and we have to be careful when we expand the context to other countries. Like I say, W3C don't, all the most countries use the rules, the ideas, but not every ideas work in Brazil because there are different contents. So another the other thing they ask, it's expensive to developers. I think it's not, because it just improve the contents you work. So if you do accessible contents, accessible developer, just okay, we work. So we use we have a HandTalk plugin. For HandTalk plugin work, the websites have to be accessible. So everything just you have to create everything with semantics, with a right structure, and for everything is accessible to everyone. So I think it's not the more expensive.
Great, thank you. There was another question on YouTube. Did you find there were differences depending on whether people lost hearing early in life or maybe at birth versus later in your testing, if there were differences?
This is an important question. Yes, there are some difference, because when the people lost the hearing late, most people don't want to learn Libras. So they have some difficulties. They most part have tried to learn some signs, try to continue communicate, but it's difficult. So they start be mad, be confused, be angry, but it's because they have a lot of difficulty, and start to learn another language is difficult in some age. So it's because that is difficult to when the people lost hearing with more elderly, and when lost hearing in early in life, it's okay, but most difficult we have here is when the parents, not the kids, because the parents have to adaptate to, because they have to learn Libras to communicate. So your children learn Libras too, and be more inclusive, everyone. So this, I think, when they lost early, it's difficult for the parents start the learning process. Yeah. So everything's difficult, but I think for the people is lost hearing, when they lost early, it's easier to learn Libras and adaptate in the society.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the challenge that you faced of finding users with disabilities for your testing is not really unique. I think all of us that are doing usability testing can struggle with finding good users, especially those with disabilities, to conduct that testing. Do you have any recommendations about finding and recruiting those with disabilities for usability testing?
Yeah, in Brazil, we have some associations, some groups, and we start to communicate with these associations, with these groups, to ask them to help us, and when we start to how I say that, we start the communication with the universities, because here we have Libras, Libras Portuguese. It's a bachelor to the people learn Libras and Portuguese to teach, to be a teacher. And the most universities have this course. They have access to deaf people, to deaf community. So we start to communicate with these universities, with these course teachers too. And we have some access to some teachers. Because we have the HandTalk app, we have access to some hearing people, not deaf, but these hearing people want to learn or have access to deaf people too. So sometimes we ask them for help too. So we use almost the society, the universities, and the community, the deaf community to access the people who helping us. But I think most important to have access to this public community, the public groups you have in your country or your society. I think this is what we do here. I think it probably help you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Livia, for that wonderful and insightful presentation. Appreciate your time today. And with that, we'll throw it back to Patrick.
Yes, and again, thanks from me as well. It was very insightful. And a lot of aspects that maybe not many developers consider at the start. So it was nice to see those mentioned as well. So for the audience at home, if you like this session, hit that YouTube like button. And don't forget, you can subscribe to ID24 on YouTube, so you'll be kept in the loop on any future events. Inclusive Design 24 is brought to you with thanks to our supporters, Google, Intopia, Barrier Break, Tetralogical, Intuit, Infoaxia, the Law Office of Lady Feingold, and ID24 will be back on the hour with our next session. So see you then.